A soldier kneels at the rubble of a war-torn village, rain pelting his scarred face. His best friend's family huddles behind him, trembling, terrified. He whispers, almost to himself, "I promised you. I'll always be here." The wind howls, echoing the weight of decades he hasn't yet fulfilled. In that moment, the world seems to wait for him, waiting for the promise of a soldier who never forgets. The first shot of his life after the war was not victory, nor applause. It was silence. A silence so thick it pressed against his chest like the heavy pack he carried in every battlefield, every firefight, every midnight ambush. The soldier, Michael, had not yet crossed 30 when he made a vow under gunfire, blood, and smoke. It was a vow whispered in the chaos of artillery, yet it carried the weight of eternity. To care for his best friend's family, no matter the cost. Decades later, Michael stood outside the small, weathered house in a quiet town far from the battles he once knew. His hands, once steady on rifles and maps, now shook slightly as he pressed a knuckle against the door. The wind smelled of damp earth and old pine. The house itself seemed to sag under years of neglect, yet it held an energy that pulled him closer, an invisible tether that tied him not just to a promise, but to a life he could not leave behind. Michael's life had never been easy. War had stripped him bare in ways no civilian could imagine. He remembered the blood, the screams, and the faces of men who would never laugh again. He remembered the acrid smoke of burning villages, the metallic tang of iron in the air, the cold bite of snow that seeped into his bones during patrols that lasted days. He remembered his best friend David laughing under that same bitter sky, joking about the absurdity of life, and then the explosion that tore David away. Michael had been too far to stop it, too far to pull him back from the edges of death. When he held David's trembling little sister and mother that day, their eyes wide with terror and grief, he had promised, "I'll take care of you, always." It had been a fleeting moment of humanity amid the carnage, but for Michael, it became a lifeline, a moral anchor, a duty he carried silently across oceans, wars, and decades of personal struggle. The world moved on. Michael moved on. But the promise remained. After leaving the military, he tried normal life. Jobs, apartments, the humdrum routines of civilians. Nothing fit. The smell of asphalt reminded him of burned roads in foreign lands. The sound of children laughing sometimes brought a piercing ache because he remembered children who had been lost. Yet every paycheck, every sleepless night, he saved, always with one thought in mind: fulfilling the promise he had made in the mud, under fire, to protect those who could not protect themselves. The conflict in Michael's life wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic in the way a storybook villain might appear. It was subtle, gnawing, persistent. Society had little room for a man defined by old battles and old promises. Authorities questioned him when he tried to claim assistance. Neighbors whispered about the weird old veteran. His family sometimes shook their heads at his obsessive loyalty to someone who had been gone for 50 years. The world demanded forgetfulness, but he could not. He would not. Then, one autumn day, the moral injustice of time pressed in. Michael received word that the family he had vowed to protect was struggling. The small business David's widow ran was failing. Their house was falling apart. And yet, they were too proud to ask for help. The very pride he had sworn to honor had become a barrier, and the weight of decades pressed down like the heavy pack on his back during patrols he would never forget. He arrived quietly. No announcement, no grand gesture, just a knock, a pause, and then the door creaking open. The faces that greeted him mirrored time itself, aging but unmistakably the same. David's sister, now grown with children of her own, stared first in confusion, then recognition. Her eyes shimmered with tears, reflecting the flickering light of the modest kitchen. Michael felt a quiet power shift within that moment, not through anger or force, but through the sheer weight of silent honor. The promise itself became a force of nature. The family's skepticism melted slowly as he offered not money, not lectures, but presence. He began by fixing the leaking roof, repairing the crumbling walls, handling paperwork they could not navigate. His hands, still scarred and strong, became instruments of quiet revolution, restoring dignity to those who had endured decades of struggle. Through it all, Michael remained calm. His silence was his shield, his patience his weapon. In a world that had often ignored or disrespected the quiet, steady sacrifices of men like him, he stood unshakable. The neighborhood, once indifferent, began to notice. Doors opened with cautious curiosity. Children watched from windows, fascinated by the man who seemed to bend time and hardship to kindness. One day, the widow whispered, almost to herself, "You've been keeping your promise all these years, and you never asked for anything in return." Michael's eyes met hers. "Promises outlive battles," he said quietly. It wasn't a boast. It was a declaration, a simple truth that resonated far beyond the walls of that small house. Weeks passed. The family's life stabilized. Slowly, hope returned, and with it, a newfound community respect. The local town council invited him to speak at a ceremony honoring veterans. He stood there, surrounded by applause and visible admiration, but he felt only the quiet echo of memory, the fires, the blood, the promise. He spoke not of glory, but of responsibility. Silent dignity, unshakable honor, he said. These are not words, they are actions. Every promise kept is a victory over time, over injustice, over the world that wants you to forget. The crowd stood, some teary-eyed, some silent in awe. Michael looked at David's family in the front row, their hands clasped together, gratitude unspoken, radiating through gestures, through glances. He had fulfilled what words alone could never convey, the essence of a promise made in desperation, upheld for decades, now realized. That night, Michael walked alone beneath the amber glow of streetlights. The wind smelled of damp earth and old pine, the same as the first day he returned. His heart was lighter, the decades of burden eased not by fortune, but by quiet, unwavering action. He understood now more than ever that life's true victories were not measured in medals, money, or fame, but in the promises kept when no one was watching. Months later, the family's home was vibrant again. Children played in the yard, laughter filling spaces that had once echoed with worry. Michael watched from the edge of the garden, a quiet smile touching his face. The world moved on, but in this little corner, justice and love had converged, proving that the human spirit, when guided by unwavering loyalty, could transcend time, pain, and loss. In reflective solitude, Michael penned a letter to David's memory. He wrote not of war, but of life, not of loss, but of continuity, not of endings, but of the enduring promise that had defined him. I promised and I kept it, not for honor, not for recognition, but because some things are bigger than life itself. Some promises are eternal. For viewers watching, Michael's story serves as a quiet reminder. Respect is earned through action. Silent strength shapes the world more than words. And the unseen battles we fight for others define the true measure of heroism. Wherever you are watching from, take a moment to reflect on the promises you've made, the silent acts of care you've carried, and the heroes you've known who never sought applause. Share your thoughts in the comments. Share this story with someone who believes in quiet strength. And subscribe to honor stories that celebrate the human spirit, the unshakable heart, and the promises that outlive us all.